Howdy, for this video I'm going to start my next part for my tutorial series of just creating a new world. So for this one I'm going to go over how to create a scene. So there are multiple ways that you can create a scene. There's a primary way where you can take an image of something that you already have a map that you found on the internet or you made yourself, and you can add the image and put it on there, and then you can draw the walls and go that route. There's another way of using a module that I'm going to show you how to use. It's called the Universal Battle Map Importer, and you can actually take a file, depending on whatever program you're using to make a map, if that's what the route that you're going, and you can export it as a universal tabletop file, and you can use this program to upload it straight into the game, and it'll already pre-build your walls for you and save you a little bit of effort. The only downside is, depending on what program you're using, like I use Dungeon Draft, it makes all the windows doors, but that's a simple, easy fix. But the program that I primarily use for making maps is Dungeon Draft. I want to say it costs like 20 or 30 bucks just for the program. It's a one-time fee, and then you have it forever. This is one of the maps that I made for my Curse of Strahd campaign. It's just the tavern in the village of Barovia. It was the Blood on the Vine tavern. And I'm going to export it two different ways so that you can see how we can do it. So the first way I'm going to do is I'm going to export it as a PNG file. I'm going to set the pixels to 70, and I'm going to go ahead. You could have the grid turned off if you want, so you can use the grid that's on Foundry, or you could have it turned on and you'll see the dotted lines, whichever you want to do. So I'll go and just turn it off, and we'll export it. I'm going to put it on my desktop, and I'll just do test1 as the first name, and that one's done. And I'm going to export it again as a universal tabletop file, and I'm going to export it again, and I'm going to name it test2, and done. And it'll save it as two completely different files. All right, so once that's done, you're good to go. So I'm just going to minimize this, and we're going to go into Foundry again. So for the modules that I'm using for this scene tutorial, I'm going to show you the ones that I'm actually using for it. So I'm going to be using DF Curvy Walls, DF Scene Enhancement, Library, DF Hotkeys, Monk's Scene Navigation, and Universal Battle Map Importer. I'm going to have all of these modules links in the description, so you'll be able to have all these that you're going to need. Once you have them on, you don't have to do anything. So for each module, each one of them does something a little different. So the curvy walls, when you are doing the map and you're building everything, it'll give you some additional options. So it'll actually give you the option to make a square, you can make a circle, you can make kind of universal curves and very special defined shapes if you need to do something very specific. The scene enhancement is actually going to make it so when you click on the scene, you don't have to when you click on a scene, once they're loaded in, you usually have to right click on it, click activate, or toggle the navigation just to get the scene to pull up. But with the scene enhancement, you just click on it, it'll immediately open up, and it saves you a little bit of extra steps. The hotkeys, I believe, is one of the dependencies on some of the DF scenes, so it's just one of the ones that you have to have running with it. The scene navigation is actually one of my new favorites. It creates actual folders, so if you make your scenes and you put them in separate folders, which I'll show you in a second, it'll actually put those folders at the very top of the bar up here, and it'll show you that folder, and it'll create a little drop down box for you to kind of navigate through the scene, so it doesn't make this top bar very cluttered. It works really, really well. I love it. And it actually gives you the option to minimize it, so if you have a bunch of scenes and you want to kind of take it away to give your screen a little bit more space, especially if you're playing like on a laptop or something, it can minimize that. The last one is the Universal Battle Map Importer, and that's going to be the other one that we're going to use to load one of the scenes. And so now let's actually make a scene. So we'll do the first tavern, just doing it just the regular base way, not using the importer, so you can kind of see. So I'm going to go over all the different settings that you can do when you create a scene. So we're going to do new scene. We're going to name it Test 1. And so when you have this, you can get your image, whatever you're going to use. So this is going to be the background image is what's this big gray area. That's your background. So we're going to look for my scene that I just made. So we're going to go to the worlds. I'm in my Grim world, and I'm going to go. You'll have a folder that is predefined in there. It's going to be under scenes. You'll have data and scenes will be the two ones once you create a base world. So when you go to scenes, you're going to choose a file. I'm going to go to my desktop where I saved it, and I have test 1, which is right here. So I'm going to open this up, and test 1 is right here. So I'm going to select the file. So because the grid on my actual map that I set on my program, I set it to 70, so I need to make sure I set my grid to 70, otherwise my scaling will be off. If I want the grid to be a little darker, you can kind of just increase it towards that way. For vision and lighting, so when you're making characters and you're making all the actors and the NPCs, they'll have vision to be able to see, and that'll be defined when you set them up. So they have dark vision, if they have true sight, blind sight, anything like that, or if they are just standard human that has nothing, they have just the standard 5 foot of dim vision. So when you have this checked, that will recognize that your tokens have vision and adjust it accordingly. So, but if you don't want vision to be, a factor in your map, you can untoggle it. To do global illumination, this will just have the map lit up at all times, no matter what, depending on if you have people with vision or not. If you check it, it'll just have them lit up. The last one is fog exploration. So it'll create kind of a fog of war effect. So as the players moving across the scene, you'll actually see areas that they just went past will actually stay somewhat illuminated, so they can be like, okay, I know I've been back here. So as they're exploring the map, if they've been to an area, it'll show, or at least where they've been at. The global illumination threshold deals with lighting. So if you set it to a certain point, it won't toggle the illumination until it hits to a certain point. So the lighting of the scene has kind of like a number based on it. And when you have that, I usually just leave it off. For this last section is kind of setting up things for like just kind of like ambiance and just different things. So if you have, if you've already preloaded music or anything, or you have like a certain song that you want to kind of play in the background, you can actually create a playlist and then have that playlist linked to this. So whenever you activate the scene, it'll automatically play that song. So it's kind of a cool effect. And then also there are some weather effects that you can use. There's another module. It's called FX Master that gives you additional options, but just the base game gives you 3 options. It gives you autumn leaves, rain, and snow. And pretty much once you start the scene, it'll have that effect playing in the background. I'll demonstrate how to do that in a second. So once that's done and everything's like once you pretty much load your picture and you have your grid set up, that's pretty much all you have to do, and you're good to go. And then you can save changes. It'll ask you this: are you sure you want to do these dimensions? Just click yes, and boom, now you have a map. Now you have a scene to actually kind of work with. So another thing that I learned actually recently that I was just playing around before I made this video that I was testing. So when I loaded the map, it actually kind of started in the bottom right hand corner, which is really annoying. So every time this map loads, it's going to start in that corner. So if you actually go to your map and you click configure, if you go down to the bottom, it'll have initial view position. So if you click this little box right here, it will capture the picture to whatever you want it to be situated. So I have it just right on top, right dead center. That's where I would like my map to start every time. So once you do that, click save. So every time you load this map, it'll start centered like this. So for example, so I'll load this map and then I'll load that, boom. And then last time it started in that corner. So now it's going to stay situated in the middle where I want it to. Also to kind of see how some of the effects work. So I'll load the rain effects, and then so you can kind of see, and then it creates kind of a cool rain, just kind of a sideways angle style of rain, but still looks kind of cool, especially depending on the map. If you got a really dark, murky map, it might look really cool. So we'll turn that off and save it. So now that you have a blank scene, there's nothing on it. So now you can go to the building tool. And so with some of these things I did with my DF curvy walls, these are the options that you can do. So it'll give you, a rectangle. So when you can draw out a rectangle and you can draw out specific shapes. So if you're trying to get if you have just like a huge big block room, it's really easy to just draw out a rectangle and then you're done. Once you draw out to where you want, if you click enter, that'll make it permanent. And then you can remove it and take it off if you need to. What I typically do, especially once I create a scene, is I usually will put a border around the map so they can't accidentally go into this kind of gray area. So what I usually do is I will especially use the rectangle tool, and I'll draw out and go down and get the corner, click enter, and boom, now I have a box grid around my whole map. So once you have your map and you have your your scene ready to go, then you can actually start going through and building the walls for the scene. So there are 2 ways that you can kind of do this. So you can kind of go each individual wall, you can draw a line, get them all kind of matched up, and they'll kind of connect into one another. With the DF curvy walls, there is a actually it's not turned on this one, which is good. There's one module I have that will actually automatically connect the walls, which is actually sometimes it's good and sometimes it's really annoying. I'm glad it's actually not on right now because this makes this 1,000 times easier to actually draw the walls out. But once you're going through and you're going through and getting every little bitty wall, you can also, to save yourself a little bit of time, especially if you have walls that are really connected, when you draw out the line and you get to a point, if you hold control once you get to the end of where you want to go, it'll actually extend the point past where you go, and then you can move up. And then also, while you still have controlled moved, you can use the D-pad to kind of move through the scene a little bit to kind of make it a little easier to navigate through, especially once you have, you know, a good spot. And then to undo, because if you're still holding control, it'll still keep holding it. Just kind of right click on the mouse and then it'll get rid of that lot, that continue on. Because if you hold control and you move off, it'll hang on, but if you just right click, it'll stop. And once you get to where you're needing to, you can go through, you can add your walls, and we'll go across here. We'll go across here. That one went a little bit over, but that's okay. And we'll come down here. I'll hold control to get over here a little bit. And I'm going to hold control to move my D-pad a little bit over a little bit. Get that one there. And we are almost finished drawing this wall out. So we'll come down here, hold control, come down. Almost done with the walls, and then we can start hitting the doors and then the windows. And then I'll show you how to do a little bit of lighting as well. So come here. One thing that I learned to do and remember to do, especially for it to make sense, especially when I'm the one designing the map, I make sure to add lights on the map and design things like lanterns and candles or anything that's going to be a light source, because you want it to kind of make sense, because it looks weird when you just have a light floating in the middle of nowhere and you're like, why does that make sense and why is that there? But so I always make sure to put candles and everything everywhere, so when I create a light source it just makes logical sense. So, and now I have a couple other objects. So one of my other little favorite little tools when you're making a map is to use invisible walls. Invisible walls are the go-to for windows because they block your player from being able to go through it, but they can still see out of it. So you should be able to see out of a window unless for a particular reason the window's blocked. So I will go through and I will add my windows to everywhere real quick. And invisible walls are also really good for creating barriers for, say, like a table or a desk, or you know, anything that's going to be an obstacle for your player. So like right here, this bar in this tavern is an obstacle. This table's an obstacle. All these tables are obstacles. Even these end tables, but I don't always put one on an end table unless it's going to be like an obvious, you know, issue. So what I'll do is I'll go back to my little rectangle tool and I'll draw out, you know, a nice little square here to get these blocked off, so that way the players can't walk through them, and it'll create a good little effect once I finish up. And I'll take a player and I'll have him explore the map so you can kind of see once it's all built. All right, so got that, and then the last thing I got to do is add doors. So whoops, see, I left it in the thing. I always got to remember to undo this little button, otherwise it'll give me fits. So now I will add a door, and every single icon is color coded for drawing out your scene. So your walls are yellow, your invisible walls are just that light kind of teal. You have your doors are this kind of purple. Ethereal walls have like kind of like a light purple or lavender color, and then you have secret doors will have like a really dark purple, and terrain walls will actually be green. And we'll go over a couple of those in a second. I'll draw some out so you can see. So let's get the rest of these doors built. Got about 4 more to go, and then the main door. So okay, got there. Almost finished. And you'll see once I use the universal importer how much faster it is than this, which this isn't bad. This doesn't take super long, thankfully. So I've built the entire map. Map's built. It's done. So also what I'll do sometimes, depending on if I have something that's going to be obviously big or it's going to be in the way, or if I want to create like a cool effect, what I'll usually do is I'll take like the terrain wall and I'll do something like this this little fireplace, and I'll draw some walls out here, and I'll do the same thing for the one up here in this little kitchen area, and we'll come out just a little bit so it kind of, you can see this wall a little bit. and come up here and match that up there. Perfect. All right, so now we're going to add some lights to it, so give a little bit of personality. So what I usually do is I usually look for a light source that I'm going to copy and paste many a time. So these candles on these tables are going to be the thing I'm going to copy and paste the most. So what I'll usually do is I'll draw one light out, and I'll go through and I'll decide the size that I want it to be. So typically what I'll do is I'll usually make candles like this. I'll do like a dim light radius of 10, and then I'll do a bright light radius of 2.5. I usually make the darkness threshold 2.25, so as it starts getting darker, you'll see it transition, it'll turn on. I'll go through my light color. It doesn't really matter the number. I usually just kind of find a color that makes sense. So I usually kind of go for like an orangish yellow look. I drop the intensity down to, for candles, to usually about 2.5 is usually kind of like my sweet spot. I change it to a torch. And for candles, because they're not as big flames, I usually drop them to about 1 and 1 or 1 and 2. And then I'll save it. And then now we're going to change this to night mode so you can actually see it in action. And so once that lights up, so now we'll turn out of the light so you can kind of see. So it's got that bright light around this candle that it's kind of giving off. So it creates a nice little good effect of that particular light. And then once I have one light source, especially for the candles that I'm going to just copy and paste all over the place, once I'll set it back to day so I can actually make sure I don't miss any. I'll take the light source and I'll hold it in place. Another little trick that you can do is when you're adding pretty much anything on any kind of object that can be selected, you can hold shift and it will put it in pretty much wherever you want it. So what I mean is, so like if I want to put this one on this light source, sometimes it doesn't always go exactly where I want it to. Sometimes what'll happen is you'll paste something or you'll move it over and you'll say I want it here, and what'll happen is it'll shift over just a hair and then it won't be centered where you want it. So if you really want it to be centered on something, you just kind of hover over it and hold shift when you're placing it down, and then it'll hold it in place and it'll put it exactly where you want it. So like I'll usually get that dead center on the spot and paste all these light sources in here real quick. And we are almost done building this map completely. And after that, I'll show you how a character looks on the map. And we'll pop one right here. And we'll stop right here with this one because that's enough of those. And then I'll add these two light sources on the outside, and I'll show you a couple little tricks that you can do with these two, especially since these lights are on the outside and they're not going to be, you know, just a full circular radius that you're really going to see. So with these lights out here, I'm going to draw just a brand new light. And what I'll do for torches, usually outside like this, I usually make them a little brighter because they're usually the ones that you're going to see when you're walking up to a building, and they're going to be a little bit more prominent. So I'll usually set the bright radius to about 5 on these, and I'll use the dim radius to about 20. It's usually about where I go. And then I do about 2.5, or actually use about 1 to 1.5 or 2, so that way it kind of pops up a little bit faster, because those would be lights that you would expect to be turned on first, and then candles would be turned on a little bit later. Because as it gets a little bit darker, the scene will gradually turn on the lights. If you adjust the darkness threshold, if you put like the candles at like 5, the lights outside will turn on first, and then the candles will turn on. So it's kind of cool, especially there's one module that actually gives you like dusk, like daytime, dawn, dusk, and then additional to like day and nighttime. So it gives you like 4 different lighting options. And then so for the color intensity, I will do 3, and we'll come down here and we'll pick a light. I'll just kind of do this one right here. We'll do a torch. I'll do 2, and then since these are going to be a little bit more prominent because they're bigger torches, I'll do 2 and I'll do 3. And so I'll copy and paste this one, and I'll drop this one right here, and I'll get that one where I want it, and this one I'll put here. So with this light, I don't really want it to come into this room, and if I leave it as is, and if I leave it at a 360 angle, it will. So what you can do is you can actually adjust the emission angle. So if you want it to literally just be a 180-degree circle, you can just cut it in half, and then you can just hold shift, and then you can rotate the light around however you want, or you can hold control and you can do like some micro movements. If you do them at if you do the shift, it moves them in about, I think it's like 15 or 45-degree angle, or it's like 15-degree angles every time you turn it. And so we'll drop this one here, and I'll get it right up against the wall. And then so if I drop it here, it's not going to be right up against it. It's actually going to be it's going to stop just a little before. So this is one of those ones you're going to kind of hold shift to kind of get it in a spot that you like. and I actually want it to come around this corner just a little bit. So what I'll do is I'll just bump it up a little bit and do like 210, and that's about kind of where I'm wanting it to do. Because if not, I'm going to have that light kind of coming in the room, and I don't really want that. And you can kind of get this lined up, because I don't want it to really go in the room if I can help it. And see, that one's still going to do it. So we'll do this one, we'll do 190, and that should get it about where I want it. And then I'll adjust here, and there we go. That way it won't go into the room, and then I'll get it a little bit more centered as best I can. All right. Now let's change this to night mode, and we can see how we look here. All right, so let's go nighttime. And as this transitioned to light, my first light's turned on, and then these turned on a little bit after. And now we got a really cool effect, and you got a nice just nighttime glow. These lights, you know, give a little bit of effect. Now they don't go into in the room here, and it makes a little bit more sense. And it creates a very nice effect, and I really like it. And we'll drop a character into it real quick so we can see kind of what we're dealing with here. So my knight right here, I'm gonna go to his token. He currently does not have vision set up, so I'm gonna set his dim vision to 60, and we'll do that. And he will now have a little bit of sight. So now when he comes around, he'll be able to see up to a certain point, but let's actually drop him down to 5 so you can kind of see the difference, especially when they can't see as far out. Let me see what we're dealing with. So now he's got this little bubble that he can see, and as he moves around, he's very limited in what he can do and what he can see. And it makes it a little bit more difficult, and it makes having like a torch or something to be really important for this guy. So having these various effects and the lights to be able to make your scene makes it really fun and enjoyable. And then it's like, hey, I can use the window to be able to see and peer into a building to kind of get an idea what's in there. All right, so now let's use the other way of creating a scene using the universal battle map importer so you can kind of see the difference. So now let's do, I'm going to name my scene, so I'm going to name it test2, and I'm going to choose my file. So my file is going to be this test2 that I had there, and I'm going to click import. So once I do this, you'll notice that it's already going to show the doors because it's automatically created everything. So the only thing it did that I don't like, but it's very easy to fix, is it creates the windows as doors. It's a very simple fix. Once you come over to them, you just delete them. And sometimes, depending on how you drew the walls, you might have like a doubled. I remember I doubled these up on accident. And so we'll delete this last 2. And we will add some windows. And then we pretty much have 2 full maps ready to go, and doing it in both different ways. But see, this is significantly faster, and if you have the means to export it as a universal tabletop file or virtual tabletop file, I would highly recommend it because this was way faster. And once I draw this last window, I'm technically done building it, and the only thing else I would have to do would be adding the little features of blocking off, things like that, if that's something that I was going to do. And then the only other thing you would have to do that would be to draw lights and make scenes, or make the scene lights. But that's pretty much it for making a scene. It's very straightforward. It's not super complicated, but it's also really important because it's going to be, you know, what your players are going to be running on the entire time. So you really want it to be, you know, it's good to take your time and make the scenes, you know, really vivid and create some cool various effects. So the only other thing I was going to show is the different walls that you can do. So let's say I'm trying to create, I'll create a box real quick, and I will make a couple examples. So let's make a box and do that there, and I'm gonna make a circular wall with the terrain wall, and we'll draw a circle out. And what's really nice about these features with drawing the circles is when you are making a square or a circle, and like let's say you're trying to make something really precise. So I'll use one of these stools as an example. So let's say I'm drawing a stool out and I'm trying to get the circle, and I want it just right, and I can't really see. If you actually take these little dots right here, these little red dots, you can use it to really fine tune whatever you're trying to make. So you can take this and get it exactly where you want it to create your object. So you can like really fine tune something, which I was just a little bit hair off, but unfortunately that's such a small object I couldn't see it really well. But you can see what I mean. It makes fine tuning an object very, very easy. You can just move those little red circles up and down, left and right until you really get what you're looking for. So we're going to add a secret door. I'm going to delete one of these walls, and I'm going to add a secret door. As soon as I click the right thing and get off the circle. And let's add a secret door right here. And we're going to add a wall just to connect it so you can see the difference. And then on the bottom side, I'm going to create an ethereal wall so you can see the difference with that too. So we'll remove that 1/2 section and let's add an ethereal wall right here. Okay, so let's add our token back onto the map so you can kind of see how this works real quick. So let's do my Blood Knight here. He has no vision set up, so let's do a vision of 60 so he can actually see pretty good. All right, so now we just have this this nice little box here that I made. When he walks up to it, he will not be able to see this door if he's in the player side. When he's in the player side, this will just be a big box. So me as the DM, I can see it. He can't see it, unfortunately, or he will not be able to see it. So one module that you can load, I want to believe it is smart doors. Smart doors right here. So if you click and add to this module, when you are with a secret door, it will actually kind of gray it out to help the DM actually remember, oh, hey, this is a secret door. So that way you know, okay, this is one that they might not see or even notice. So the only bad thing is if you leave it like normal without the smart doors module, you won't even know it's a secret door. It just looks like a door. So unless you remember that you made it, it's kind of confusing sometimes. So to go down to over to the other side where I made the terrain wall, I have the big circle that I made that gives it kind of the translucent effect of that he can kind of see around it, but it's still also being partially blocked. So any of the terrain things isn't going to have the same black barrier as with the regular walls, but it still obscures line of sight because they still can't see completely around it. And for the last wall, the ethereal walls, it's going to create the effect of a wall that they still cannot see past. So when he walks up to this one and he tries to go forward, he can't because there's a wall in the way. But with the ethereal walls, it still creates the semblance that they can't see past it. But if they walk through it, they'll actually be able to enter it, even though they can't technically see past it, but they can actually move past it. So you can use that to create, like kind of like a hidden wall that like they push a switch, or if it's like any kind of like spectral thing that it's like this wall that's hidden or something that they can pass through. Or it's really good for changing in elevations. So if you have something that's like it's going upstairs and it's still on the same map, you can use a ethereal wall to go, and actually you can change wall directions, which is really cool. So let me show you for example. So get a ethereal wall, and I'm going to draw a wall, which I got to get the tool back. All right, so let's draw a wall, and it's being stubborn. Okay, let me move that one. Let's do an ethereal wall again, and there we go. All right, so I'm going to draw a wall here. So when you have a wall and you click on it, you will actually be able to change the wall direction. So if you have the wall facing the left, so as they look at the wall, they cannot see past it. So this is really good for like if you have a staircase and they get ready to go up the staircase below the wall, they can't obviously see up at the top of the stairs because it might be an elevation of 20 feet. So once they get to the top of the stairs, they would be able to see down. But if they go down and they're at the base of the steps, they shouldn't be able to see up. So using ethereal walls is really good for creating the effect of changing elevation, because like say if they get to the top of the stairs, then okay, hey, I can look down and obviously at the base of the stairs, but if you're at the bottom, you shouldn't be able to see up at the very top. So it's really good for stuff like that. And any kind of wall like that is really effective, especially actually doing certain walls is really good for like battlements and things like that for like castles. And invisible walls are just the great for like windows and things like that. But I think that's just about it. I believe I covered every possible thing I can for creating a scene and setting it up and drawing the walls and adding a little bit of lights to it to give it some extra effects. If you have any questions about anything, please let me know. I'll do whatever I can to help you out. And if you need anything, I'm here for you, and I'll see you in the next one.